Hi there, I'm Katie Cat, and this is our weekly AstroTarot. I just wanted to give a shout out to people who have been liking and sharing my videos, as well as people who have been sending me donations to help get my cards printed, which I'm very excited about. I should be able to ship the decks out that people have ordered in the coming month, based on my projections of when I'll be able to get them shipped to me from the printers. So that is very exciting. And just so you have a little bit of background on it, I originally drew this deck in 2011 and 2012 by hand and colored them with colored pencils, and they were in a laminated deck. And I had started offering daily tarot readings when we were all in kind of quarantine with the first stages of COVID. And my deck that was handmade and laminated started to get destroyed. One of my friends suggested that I actually get them printed. And so I took the time to scan all of my cards, resize them, and make sure that they worked in a smaller format because my other cards were like 6x4. And so I was able to get these cards created, and I designed them with kind of a playing card back because I learned after I drew my first set of cards, these are actually my second set of tarot cards that I've drawn, but after my first set, I had learned that my grandfather, who had been deceased since I was probably around 9 years old, that he read tarot cards as he was traveling throughout the country, and he read the cards by way of a normal 52 card playing deck. So I created the back to kind of resemble a deck of playing cards, with my drawings as the tarot cards. There's 78 cards in a deck. 22 of those are major arcana, which typically are highlighting life lessons when they come onto the table and come into readings. And then the other cards, which are considered the minor arcana, known as suited cards, like the wands and the cups and the swords and the pentacles, those are more speaking to day-to-day matters and are highlighting kind of elemental energies in our own toolbox. Speaking of our will by way of the wands, our finances and our values and our resources by way of the pentacles, our mind and our conversations and communications and travel by way of the swords. And then of course we have the cups, which is highlighting our relationships and our emotional center and the terrain of the heart and how that can create the landscape of our lives. So we have these suited energies, and then the major arcana, what's interesting about them is that they also speak to planetary influences. And so what I had discovered in offering my daily tarot readings is that over weeks of time, certain major arcanas would show up again and again and again. And I started to realize that it really was highlighting planetary transits that we were working with, and it kept bringing it up because these were life lessons that we were all dealing with. Now, when we look at the planets, right, and as we've all been taught since we were little kids, there's this kind of cycle and orbit of all these different planets, and Mercury is the closest one, and it goes all the way out to Pluto being the furthest planet away. Now that means, of course, that the planet that's the furthest away is going to have the greatest amount of time to complete its orbit. So Pluto has an orbit of 248 years to move around the whole zodiac system, whereas Mercury, being the first planet closest to the sun, it takes 88 days. So it actually moves around the sun a few times every year. It also has experiences of retrograde, which is when we kind of slow down and have to reconsider how we're thinking about things and how we're looking at things, because Mercury is this quicksilver energy, right? And when it is in a period of retrograde, it's not moving as fast. It's asking us to really take into consideration every step along the way and move in a more purposeful way than in a very speedy way, which is typically associated with quicksilver, the planet of Mercury. So I say all of this because we have a couple of players on the table for this week, which Mercury is one of them. And the reason why I have been focusing more on AstroTarot than just the traditional meanings of the cards is because we are in really pivotal times right now by way of planetary transits and how those planets are lining up in our sky. And of course, that's going to influence you and your life depending on where those zodiac signs are sitting in your natal chart. Now, a couple of days ago, on the day of the eclipse, I took a picture of this diagram with various rising signs so that people could see, for instance, if you have a Scorpio rising, you would see that Pisces is in your 5th house, and the Mars and Saturn energy is going to be influencing your creative energies, also your relationship with your children and having children and any creative matters of the heart that you endeavor in, because the 5th house is naturally governed by the sign of Leo, which governs the heart. Now that gives this energy and texture to the 5th house, but because Pisces is sitting there, that lends another lens, I would say. So if you've ever had the experience of going to an eye doctor when they kind of clip different lenses in front of your eyes to see, to allow you to choose which one you see clearer through, it's kind of like that. There's this energy that's naturally there, and then when the planet moves through that house, it gives you a different perspective and a different scope. Now, in the realm that's happening with Pisces right now, we have Mars and Saturn that are conjunct, which have opposite energies. We have Saturn, which is very purposeful and responsible and disciplined and slows things down, and you have Mars, which is like the pep rally for things to get going, right? It's that very fiery energy that's forward moving. And we saw that in January of 2020 when we had a big stellium in Capricorn that was kind of creating a lot of shifts in our social structure and in our global arena. And then when Mars went through that same space of where the stellium was at in March, we saw where everything got shut down. It was like Mars initiated changes to happen. So Mars has that energy of, you know, people kind of hanging out the window, cheering people to go forward and to move forward and move things in a place of progression. So we have these two energies that are happening in Pisces right now. And of course, depending on your rising sign, they're going to be influencing a different area of your life. There's 12 houses in this system. The first house is always in this quadrant that you're looking at to the furthest left. Second house is beneath that. Third house is next to that. Fourth house, which would be the foundation of the diagram or the chart. Then the 5th house, the 6th house, the 7th house is opposite of the 1st house, and it moves all the way around to the 12th house. Now, it's always going to be, like the houses are always going to be in the same position. So even though you may have a different rising sign, the 1st house will still be in this area of your chart. 1st house represents you, what motivates you. It's also your body coming into form. And so when you take that energy and then you lay over it the lens of your rising sign, you start to get a texture and a sense of where you are inspired to show up in life and where you're called to show up, because that's what your rising sign is. Now, every single house has its own arena of your life that it governs. And so when these planets move into this space, they're like bringing a train full of all of these different supplies and baggage that planet governs into that space in your life for you to work with. And depending on which planet it is, it could sit there for some time. Now, the planets that we have that are speaking up for their presence that are on the table today are the planet of Venus, the planet of Mercury, and then the energetic of Taurus. Now, when we look at where these planets are, we see that Venus has just moved into the sign of Aries. Now, Venus doesn't like to be in the sign of Aries. She'd much rather be in the sign of Libra, which is what she governs by way of relationship. And she also governs the sign of Taurus. Now, Venus is like currently, you know, a train that has all of these supplies and abundance and all this lush food, and everyone's really taken care of on this train, right? There's lots of plants. It's very beautiful and nurturing, and she's moving through the space of Aries, which is kind of like a battleground, right? It's a barren land, and she doesn't like to be there. It's a energetic of being in her fall, right? Rather than being in her rulership sign, which is the opposite of Libra. So Venus just moved into Aries, and she's our opening card for the day. Now, typically, Venus is an energy that's telling us, we are laying the seeds of what we are going to reap. And it's a very nurturing card. It's a mothering card. But we see that she's traveling through this terrain that is making her consider the other rather than be in relationship, because Aries is a sign of self, whereas Venus governs Libra, which is a sign of relationship. And when we look at the energetics that are happening this week by way of the eclipse, they're happening in the sign of Aries, which is the sign that Mars governs. So it's like Venus is moving through this space that all of these other planets are currently. We have the sun currently there. We also have Chiron there. Sun and Chiron were just conjunct. It's like having a flashlight shining on a wound that you need to heal so that you can see what it is and see what's necessary in order to heal it. And then we have the north and south node in this axis too. The north node is at 15 degrees, and it was just transited by the sun, and it's being, conjunct with Chiron right now. And the north node is where we are basically being asked to put our attention. We're being asked to look at the wounds that are also getting in the way of our relationship. The south node is over in the opposite sign of Libra, which is in the sign of relationship. So Venus is moving opposite her natural sign. We also have Mercury there. Now, Mercury has come onto the table today as well by way of the lovers. Mercury, interestingly enough, had just started going retrograde in the beginning of April at 27 degrees of Aries. It will be going retrograde until the 25th of April, where it will stop at exactly 15 degrees Aries, which is where the North Node is. So when we look at Mercury being this planet that is, communications, it's the messenger of the gods, it's how we speak about things, it's how we describe things, it's how we see things, and it's going in this place of review. It's traveling all the way to the end degree of Aries, and then it's going to track its way back to Chiron and the North Node. So it's gaining this perspective, and we're kind of in this kind of holding pattern right now where we really have to look hard at something and see if it's where we want to put our energy and effort and what we need to yield to in our experience. So this opening energy of Empress was followed by the challenge of the Queen of Cups. Now, Queen of Cups is associated with Cancer, but it's also this cardinal water energy. It's active emotion. So what's interesting about this is typically the Empress is associated with nurturing, but so is the Cancer, the sign of Cancer. It's the sign of the mother as well. So what is it that where are we being challenged in the realm of nurturance? Are we actually taking the time to look at what is good and bad for us so that we can kind of decipher which things we want to assimilate into our lives and which things we need to let go of? Because mothers ultimately are the ones that, raise their children, with fathers as well, but that's done through love, and it's also done through discipline. Now, the way through the challenge showed up as the Knight of Pentacles. Now, this is an energy, if you look at the horse in this card, all of the hooves of the horse are on the ground. It lends this kind of stable, solid energy that's asking you to move slower, to take every step with purpose. And it's in the sign of, or it's in a pentacle sign, so it's in an earth governed sign. And so we're looking at, what's interesting to me is that we have all of these energies moving through Aries, and the next sign that we have over here is Taurus, which is a sign that is governed by an earth element, and that is also a sign that Venus governs. So it's almost like, you know, if you've ever been on a trip and you're like on the last leg of your trip and you're starting to run out of supplies and you're starting to really look forward to getting home because, you know, maybe you've just been traveling for a long time. We consider Venus has been traveling, you know, since she left Libra. She's been traveling through all of this terrain. She passed through Pluto, she passed through Mars and Saturn, and now she's going through the sign of Aries. She's on her way home, and she'll be in Taurus by the end of this month, actually on the 30th of April. Now, the next card that showed up on the table for today is the Hanged Man. And the Hanged Man is an energetic of yielding to a situation and surrendering to a situation. It's also governing the sign of Pisces, which is what I wanted to touch on earlier because Mars and Saturn are both in the sign of Pisces. So if you have strong Pisces energies or you have planetary positions, you know, that are in Pisces, for me, myself, I have Pisces sitting in my 7th house because I have a Virgo rising. So I'm experiencing this Saturn and Mars energy in the house of relationship, in this house of partnership. Whereas if you had a Gemini rising, you'd be experiencing this energetic in the house of career and life path and the legacy that you leave behind. So depending on your rising sign, these energetics really do shape an area of your life that you're working with right now. And the Saturn and Mars conjunction are posing some kind of challenge because they provide these two opposite energies, the energy of responsibility and discipline, and the energy of like, go for it, go full speed ahead. So there's these two energies that are working with each other that are bringing up a lot to the surface for us to look at. Now, when you see something, you can't ignore what you see, right? So there's that quality of yielding or seeing through the illusion or seeing through, you know, the things with clarity, because when you consider Pisces governs water, it's mutable water. When you dip your head underwater and look around, everything looks bigger. Everything is out of shape with the perspective that it is. And there's this energetic with Saturn and Mars that are having us come to terms with that, asking us to really take a hard look at that to see what we want to put that energy and discipline toward. Because consider that Saturn is going to be in the sign of Pisces for another 1.5 to 2 years. So it's going to be bringing up this leveling up energy to whichever house your Pisces sits in your chart. Now, if you'd like to look at that more personally, you're welcome to reach out to me so that we can schedule time to look at your chart. Because of course, where your planets are placed and in association with each other, that's going to lend a very personal experience with what's going on in your life. Now, that card was followed up by the Two of Pentacles, which is balancing in the midst of chaos. We see this person who's walking on a tightrope. They have one pentacle in one hand, another pentacle in another, and there's kind of like this figure 8 that's wrapped around the 2 pentacles. So it's lending this quality of cycles around something and having these two things that you value that you have to keep ahead of yourself, while at the same time there's this swelling water, this swelling emotion going on behind us. So it's reminding us that when things get chaotic and you start to see lots of surges in the emotions, you have to keep your focus in front of you. You have to keep your hands on the things that you value. And there's going to be reflection on that of where to put your energy and where to put your time. Ultimately, because time is our greatest resource. And if we look over at the swelling water and this, you know, big wave, rather than keeping our focus on the tightrope that we're walking, then it'll be very easy to fall off the tightrope because our gaze isn't set on our goal. We have to keep our aim in sight always and through everything. Now, that card was followed up by the Lovers card, which is why I brought in the energy of Gemini. The Lovers card is all about communications. It's all about making choices because it is governed by Gemini. It's like, you know, the higher, the lower, the sacred or the mundane, like making choices and choosing words based on what you actually want to nurture and grow in your life. And we see that there's this energetic of this angel kind of looming over these two people. So there's this quality of something coming together to bring about some kind of awareness. And as I mentioned earlier, we're currently experiencing a Mercury retrograde, which is going through the sign of Aries, and then it's going to come back to the North Node. So it's something that I'm seeing as like a recalibration of the way that we see things, the way that we think about things, the way that we speak about things, particularly in relationship, because we have this axis between the North and South Node happening in Aries, which is where the North Node is, and the South Node, which is over in Libra. So we can't lose ourselves to relationship. We still have to keep a sense of identity and what we bring to the table within relationship. And we're seeing that right now because we have so much energy happening in the sign of Aries, anchored around Chiron and the North and South Node. And consider that those aren't alignments that are constant, right? Like this is a very unique experience that we're all going through that's helping us all to recalibrate in some way based on where this axis is sitting in your chart. And that card is finalized by the King of Pentacles. Now, the King of Pentacles, we see another kind of solid, grounded energy. It's fixed earth. It's associated with the sign of Taurus. And by fixed, it means unmoving, right? It's very stable. Taurus governs our resources. It governs our values. It governs our throat and how we speak about things, interestingly enough. So having this kind of interplay between the energies of the throat and Taurus, our values, and Mercury, which is in this retrograde phase, it's calling us to look at something that's happening right now. Now, what's going on in Taurus is something that is a once in a lifetime experience that we are about to go into. We currently have Uranus over in Taurus. And we have Jupiter, which is currently at a couple degrees away from Taurus, or from Uranus, but it will be in conjunction with Uranus on April 18th. And some interesting things to also consider about April 18th is on that same day, we will have Venus, which will be transiting over the North Node. And we will have Mercury also transiting over the North Node, but still by way of retrograde. Now, the thing about Uranus and Jupiter being conjunct in Taurus is that this only happens once in about 84 years. So Uranus takes 84 years to move around the whole zodiac wheel. It spends about 7 years in each sign, and it's the planet of big, unexpected change to outworn conditions that prevent us from progressing in an area of our life. So wherever Taurus is at, you've likely been experiencing a lot of change in that area. Now, having that combined with Jupiter, which Jupiter takes around 12 years to move around the entire zodiac wheel, having them meet up in the sign of Taurus is like having an expansive energy of Jupiter, because Jupiter is expansive. It's also a planet that's associated with help. It's the Santa Claus of the zodiac. Sometimes, though, help comes in interesting ways, right? Like when Uranus first moved into Taurus, for me personally, my car got totaled, but it was also a car that I was having a really hard time being able to afford. So it did me a lot of grace by the fact that my car was totaled, and I also was graced by the fact that I wasn't injured. And there was a couple of alignments that are happening in my chart that I've been reflecting on since then. And of course, it got my attention. So I've been watching Uranus move through the 9th house for me. Also within that time, within the first couple of weeks of Uranus moving into the sign of Taurus, which is in my 9th house, I was asked to start teaching, and I started teaching classes on aromatherapy and distillation and medicine making at the herbalism school that I was going to. I started building written materials. And these are all things that I'm going to be developing and publishing within the next month, which is within this realm of when Jupiter and Uranus are going to be in this conjunction. So it's big changes. But when we reflect on things that happened 84 years ago, we'd be looking around the year of 1941, more like 83 years ago, and what was going on in the world then, which is really similar to what's going on now. Well, that's a whole nother aspect of astrology to research, which is really telling and really interesting. Historically, but then you can also do things like that in your own life with planets that are personal planets or that move, faster, so to speak, than the outer planets that are very slow moving, like Uranus. So we have these really big shifts happening right now, and we're currently in this position where we're like just watching and seeing what we need to change and gathering information. And we have to ultimately move from a place of where our values are. And there are going to be a lot of changes and shifts that are happening globally and, internationally and even nationally based on where these planets are placed. But for you personally, it's going to be a whole nother thing. So I think it's interesting that these cards have come up. I think it's interesting that we're seeing this interplay between Venus approaching the North Node, and then she's going to be moving into Taurus at the end of this month, and she will be in conjunction with Uranus, which is where we are experiencing all of this change, on the 18th of May. So for the next month, I would be really interested in you taking a look at your life and seeing where these things are showing up for you, where you are taking a pause, and where you will feel kind of a big shift and like a go energies, because we're in this pause pattern right now. We're in this holding pattern for a reason. It's asking us to take in information so that when we do get the inner sense to move and that things are changing, that we respond in a way that's in alignment with what we want to nurture and grow in our lives. So interesting stuff, I think. I know it was a long reading today. I hope it was useful. If you want to look at where the planets are gathering by way of house, then I will share those pictures on my Facebook page, which is called Roots of Alchemy. I also have it on my personal page, Katie Delaney, if you want to find me that way as well. I also recently started a TikTok. I don't know how long I'll be on TikTok, but I just thought it would be a good way to share images. So you can follow me or find me through Roots of Alchemy there as well. And again, just thank you for sitting with me today. Thank you for being interested in astrology. For me, it's one of my greatest passions that I just can't get enough of. I love studying it, and I love the inner relationship with the Tarot since I've been, working with the Tarot for a good part of my life and called to work with the Tarot, it seems like, subconsciously in interesting ways through ancestry. But I send you a lot of love. I hope you're well. I hope you're taking time to take care of yourself and being honest with yourself on what you want to change and nurture in your life. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.